Did you know that 95% of American farmers are white? Farmers in general are on the brink of extinction, not to be dramatic. But less than 2% of our population are farmers, and only 1% of them are Black. Let's just contrast those numbers with 100 years ago, when more than 40% of us were farmers. In 1910, according to the census, 14% of farmers were Black. P.J. Haynie is one of those rare Black farmers, and among row crop farmers, Black farmers are even more scarce. What's more, he almost didn't make it, not as a farmer, and possibly not at all. Really, things could have been much different. Are you ready to travel to the Deep South with me today? When, in the summer, the signature heat and humidity makes the peaches sweeter and the okra magical. We are heading straight into the land of Virginia row crops to join Black row crop farmer P.J. Haynie on his farm. We'll go back some generations with P.J. and feel the deep-seated commitment and drive that started for P.J. on the carpet of his own living room where he dreamed of being just like his dad. We will also get a taste for what it's like growing up as a Black farmer in the American South, from the USDA office to the conference rooms of Monsanto. Welcome to Talk Farm to Me. I am your host, Dana DiPrima, and we have been here together exploring the backfields of farms and the hearts of American farmers since 2019. When you get to know a farmer here, you are closer to your own food and the system in which it is produced, warts and all. Talk Farm to Me brings you right into the intersection of your food, health, the environment, local economies, and the communities where you can better know and understand how it is all interconnected. That's what it's all about. I get farmers to talk farm to me, so you can soak it in and talk farm to your friends about your deeper understanding of the farming culture that is central to all of our lives, our health, and our communities. Before we begin, I want to remind you that this podcast has grown and become popular because of listeners like you. When you listen, when you share it with a friend, you are taking a small action that has a big impact. So, make a note that when this episode is done, you will share it so others can be more deeply connected too. Back to the South, ready? Here's some context for our story today. Do you know what a row crop farmer is? It's a little bit like it sounds, but here are some facts to give you some perspective. A row crop farmer plants and harvests traditional crops such as corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, potatoes, canola, sunflowers, flax, sugar beets, field peas, etc. The practice began in 6th century China. In America today, such crops are grown across extremely large areas with the aid of machinery. The average row crop farm size is 445 acres, and the most common row crop is corn. P.J. Haynie and I begin our conversation with Mr. Haynie in his truck on the farm, keeping cool from the blazing sun. Just before our chat, I had read an interview with P.J.'s father that was featured in the Washington Post in 2004. I will link the article in the show notes. His father wouldn't take a break from all that he had to do just for the reporter and gave his interview from his truck. Like father, like son. I feel like you're out on the farm somewhere.
I am. I'm sitting back here behind the shop.
I feel like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I read an interview with your dad, and the interviewer was like, we're in a truck.
That Washington Post article got a lot of traction. And that was in 2004. I remember that like yesterday. It was pretty good story. And I still use that resource when I am talking to people day because it really helps them understand fire in the belly of PJ, and why I'm so passionate about farmers and black agriculture and so on. So I like that article.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I thought it was well done, and it certainly painted a picture of a lot of history that I have been paying attention to. I'm interested to hear about the fire in your belly because besides the interest that you have in agriculture that you shared with your father and your history, it sounds like you really have that fire. Tell me how the history that you experienced being your father's son has influenced how you do your work and how you proceed.
I have had a front row seat at Black Farmer Inequity for a while. My dad and my son were cleaning out one of our office buildings last weekend. They sent me a picture that I had framed. I was in Jet magazine in 1998, and I had a pair of bib overalls, and I was holding the mule at a Black Farmer protest rally in front of the federal building in Atlanta. I was a college junior at the time, I think. Had applied for my first beginning farmer loan, wanted to farm, had some horrific things happen to me as far as how I was treated at the USDA county office.
We will get into this. It's the kind of story you hear about, but you don't want to believe is true.
The reason I was out there protesting so other black farmers wouldn't have to go through and endure the same mistreatment that I did. That was in 1998. So almost half of my life I've been advocating for black farmer equity, for rights. And, that article you read about my dad, I realized that was 2004. Black farmers are still singing the same song that they were singing 20 years ago. The number of black farmers that have died and fell off and then given up without having their voices heard or having fair access and equitable treatment is astounding. It's a sad commentary, but it's a fact. And unfortunately, too many people have lost hope in the system, lost hope in the direction, and feared the extinction of black row crop farmers in this country.
Just to reiterate, in 1910, nearly 14% of U.S. farmers were black. They owned more than 16 million acres. Now, according to the latest census of agriculture, only 1 in 100 farmers is black, owning less than 5 million acres.
And I hope not to let them down. I hope to do my part to help advocate and push for equitable treatment. Look at this industry, production agriculture industry. Our industry is not as diverse as the needs that are under tables that consume the food that we produce every day. Our industry is not as diverse in production as it is those who benefit from the fibers that are produced in the lands that we work for clothing. And when people go and pump fuel and corn goes into ethanol and they see the E85 at the gas tank and don't realize that 15% ethanol mandate and is supported from the production of crops that they drive by, a big disconnect. In the historically underserved community, if we don't see people that look like us in industry, we don't believe that we're welcome, and we don't think there's opportunity for us. Go to any ag retailer, distributor, equipment supplier, John Deere dealership, New Holland dealership, whatever your preference may be. You walk in the building and look around. See how much of a reflection you see of yourself in the mirror.
According to the latest numbers from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2022, only 12.2% of the wholesale and retail trade are black, with only 5.4% in machinery, equipment, and supplies wholesale, and even less, only 3.9% in retail for non-automobile vehicle retail. You can think about John Deere dealerships as a part of that number. I thought it might be useful to hear a little bit of your personal stories. You mentioned them earlier about how you were treated at the USDA and specifically how that's different from how it should be. Just a little note. Stick with me here. We're going to get to this story. It's a doozy. But we're going to give PJ some latitude to walk us through his life at his own pace, in his own way, because it's about his life. It's real. It's rough. Let's start at the beginning.
I am a fifth-generation farmer from the coastal plains of Virginia. My family hails from the Chesapeake Bay area in a part of Virginia known as the Northern Neck, the northeast corner of Virginia where the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay meet. My hometown of Reedville, Virginia is the last commercial fishing village on the whole East Coast between Florida and Maine. Most of my high school friends are farmers, commercial fishermen, watermen, oystermen, crabbers. A lot of the people in my county make their living on the water, and I chose to make mine on the land. I tell people I was oftentimes tricked into farming. As a kid on the carpet with my toys, carpet farming as I call it. My dad would buy me tractors and implements, the replicas of what he had outside the house in the field I had in the house on the floor as a young toddler. And then when I was able to stand up and look out the window and see Dad outside on the real thing, it kind of piqued my interest to graduate from those toys to the real deal. I wanted to do the same thing he was doing. When I started to run across the yard and reach up for him to grab me and put me up in the cab with him and sit in his lap, I'd reach for the steering wheel. And as I got older and I became more skilled with the equipment, I remember times where Dad turned me loose in the field to drive on my own. A couple of the tractors, I couldn't reach the clutch, but he told me if I needed to stop it, just to choke it out on the end, And that interest in equipment drew me to wanting more. By the time I was 12 years old, I was really replacing a 50-year-old hired hand on the farm. I could operate the equipment just as well, and my mother had to threaten me with my life to do my homework first before I could go out there and get on that tractor. But wherever the guys were working, if they were plowing, Dad would have my tractor in the field on Friday afternoons, and I would be plowing. I didn't want to go goof off or hang out. This is all I wanted to do, all day and half the night. I had 4 younger sisters in the house. I didn't want to go home and fight with them, so it just focused me on farming.
PJ followed this passion for tractor driving and joined Future Farmers of America. He got involved as a public speaker and competed in their high school tractor driving competition, earning himself a picture with the first Black Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Epsy. Seeing and meeting Epsy had a profound impact on PJ to take on a leadership role in agriculture.
Fast forward, I go to college. I join an organization called MANRS, MANRRS. That stands for Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. Most of your historically Black colleges and universities and other land-grant universities across the country have chapters. And the purpose of that organization is to have minority students that are in agriculture exposed to the larger corporations that may not necessarily come to the smaller schools for recruitment. My whole 4 years in college, I was involved in that organization, president of the Virginia Tech chapter my senior year. And yet I never met another Black male or female who had the same aspirations that I did of returning back to their family farm to farm. A lot of students came from farm families. A lot of students were passionate about agriculture, but they wanted to go work for corporate America or USDA. So I didn't have any kids that, looked like me that I could call up and say, hey, what are you doing on the farm today? Or, were y'all planting yet? Or are you marketing your crop? I didn't have a peer group for that.
You see it, right? This inner conflict that PJ struggles with. His ambition is natural. It grew from that living room carpet with a powerful pull from his father's work outside in the fields. But the lack of other Black leaders in farming, coupled with his peers' exodus from their own family farms, put some doubt in PJ's mind. He felt alone. After 10 years farming on his own, PJ finally met a handful of Black farmer peers who were operating at similar scales. They met in an unlikely place, not in the fields or in a manners meeting, but in a conference room at Monsanto. Monsanto was an American agrochemical and agricultural biotechnology corporation that was founded in 1901. Monsanto is famous for its weed killer, Roundup, including the ingredient glyphosate, and for genetically modified crop seeds. Monsanto was acquired by Bayer in 2018. There, 12 Black large-scale row crop farmers learned about some of the programs that Monsanto offered farmers, like a way to buy seeds up front with little to no cash on the table until that cash crop started to grow. It wasn't so much the programs that Monsanto offered that were surprising. It was this, that they never knew.
It was like a light went on because we learned, said, wait a minute, how come we are not knowing about these programs that our neighbors know about?
When PJ says neighbors, what he means is white neighbors. White row crop farmers in his own community and in the communities of the other Black farmers in the room.
It became clear and evident that our neighbors had access to information that we did not have. Therefore, they had a competitive advantage. They had additional tools in the toolbox. Some growers are going to retailers and paying 18 and 20% interest on open notes, and then the neighbors beside you have access to 0%. The problem with a lot of that information comes from the distribution model that corporate ag has. Corporations like Monsanto at the time, now Bayer, John Deere, Corteva, Syngenta, they have these corporate programs that they develop, but they rely on the local retail distribution model to implement that. And that's where the buck stops. That's where the information stops. That's where the gap widens, and that's where we need to make change.
Is there a parallel between that model and basically what's been going on at the USDA for decades?
If you look at the USDA local county committee system and the local county influence that the retail network has, yeah, because that's where the good old boy clique starts. The managers that run these retail networks, the salesmen and women that work these retail networks, they're all intertwined and involved with agriculture, and their families farm and relatives farm, and the banker is brothers with the fertilizer dealer, and everybody's connected. And there's some in the county, in the circle, who are in the loop, and there's some who are not. And because Black farmers are so limited, most of those men and women were not included in those conversations. And knowing is just half of the battle.
With this new information, this newfound awareness, this group of Black farmers did something unique. Immediately, they wanted to prevent this from happening to the next crop of Black row crop farmers, the ones playing with their own farm toys on the carpets of their living rooms.
So we decided to lay out some objectives and goals for a nonprofit organization that would later be born into the National Black Growers Council, the premier Black farm advocacy organization whose mission is to improve the efficiency, productivity, and sustainability of Black row crop farmers in this country. Our purpose is to sustain diversity in production agriculture and help be the conduit between corporate ag and Black row crop farmers in the country.
Out of that meeting at Monsanto with those Black farmers from around the country, from Texas and wherever, came the National Black Growers Council.
We decided not to be an internal group of Monsanto. We elected to be an independent nonprofit organization and have the support of Monsanto at the time and other companies who believed in our mission. And most of those farmers are still involved in that organization. That organization has grown immensely beyond those 12 men that sat around that table at that meeting.
You had mentioned earlier, like going to some of these agricultural companies or equipment companies that you're not seeing other African-American men and women working there. And I did notice that John Deere is on your corporate board. Have they made some efforts to change what they're doing by being involved with you?
John Deere is one of our sustaining members. All of our sustaining members believe in the mission of the National Black Growers Council. The real engine under the hood for the National Black Growers Council is our Model Farm Series Field Days. And we host a series of field days around the country to showcase the latest and greatest that agriculture has to offer. And we bring the Black farm community, historically underserved farm community, out to a farm to put that face front and in front of everyone, to show the new varieties of seed and chemistry, new equipment, technology that's being offered, irrigation practices, drone usage, you name it. We want to make sure we can put this front and center in front of the underserved. And we host about 6 of these field days around the country per year. And we'll have an annual meeting to recap the year and have workshops and seminars and speakers and guests and bring the Black farm community together from around the country. And that's been such a success for our organization as we've grown and the network of farmers to help each other around the country.
When you look back on your time since that meeting at Monsanto, tell me what you think your biggest accomplishments have been.
The biggest accomplishment is just being able to weigh in on industry and explain the disparities and why we need help to make a difference. To go to the companies like the Bayers and the Cortevas and the John Deeres and the New Hollands to say, hey, listen, this is what we see as a problem. We explain how access to information is such a challenge and we need help and liaisons. You know, if a farmer gets sideways with their rep and doesn't agree on how they were treated on product or they don't respond, you know, the buck stops right there in that local county. And now some of these organizations have put liaisons in place. So we have a national person to go to if we have issues or challenges, or we ordered something and the price changed or it didn't deliver on time, you know. So recognizing the need for equitable access to information and participating in programs. Every year, seed and chemical companies have new varieties of seed and technology that they have in testing for a few years before its public launch. Well, if the same group of farmers is always at the front of the line for that testing and know about it, as soon as it becomes public available information, they know to tell all their friends and buddies, and everybody at the country club knows what to go looking for and gets it. Black farmers don't know that, and we're 2 years later getting that technology, and by that time, something new has come along. Agriculture changes at such a rapid pace. We need to be early adopters, and if we're not, we are left behind.
PJ knows he is fighting an uphill battle, not wanting to leave behind the Black farmers who are already so far behind. But the fight is worth it, and without it, there's no hope.
You know, in 1920, there were 1 million Black farmers in the country compared to 4 million white farmers. There was a 1-to-4 ratio, Black farmer for every 4 white farmers. And African Americans own 16 million acres of land. Fast forward today, there are less than 15,000 Black farmers around the country. Here's another statistic, Dana. If you have 100 Black farmers in a room, only about 8% of those men and women are going to be full-time commodity growers. Full-time rice, corn, cotton, soybeans, peanuts, wheat, the growers that produce the food, fiber, and fuel that we need around the world. And only about 8% of that is row crop farmers, full-time row crop farmers. And African-American land ownership is less than 2 million acres. So 100 years ago, 1 million Black farmers, 16 million acres. Today, less than 15,000 Black farmers with 2 million acres. That 14 million acre gap, it didn't erode off the coastal plains of Virginia or California. It changed hands. And when you do a little turn row math, as we call it, and take 14 million acres that have been lost, multiply it times the average land value of about $4,500 an acre across the South, that's over $60 billion of wealth that has been lost in the Black agricultural community, and that will never come back. And I know that there's some listeners that may think, well, yeah, white farmers lost and fell off as well, and they did, but not at the staggering alarm that Black farmers did, not at the same rate. You go from a 1-to-4 ratio to over a 300-to-1 ratio. And it's not because it rained on the white farmer side of the road and it didn't rain on the black farmer side of the road. There were some purposeful and equitable treatments that took place 20, 30 years ago, some still present day, and they're creating these major disparities right now. And it's really, really hurting the growth of the black farm community. You know, we now have over 9,000 pairs of bald eagles, over 18,000 birds. Sad to tell you that there are more bald eagles in the lower 48 states than there are black row crop farmers.
Does that help you see it? Farmers are endangered and black farmers are nearly extinct. We care more about bringing back bald eagles than we do about the men and women who feed us. Don't get me wrong, I love all the bald eagles that soar over my small farm now, but I don't know more than one black farmer in this rural area. It's important that we understand the numbers.
Most of your black farmers span from Virginia down to Florida, as far west as Texas, and in the southern states. After slavery and sharecropping, a lot of African Americans remained to work the land that they're on, and some have migrated north. There's a Kansas Black Farmers Association that has a few black farmers in Kansas, but we struggle to find black farmers in some of the northern states. I don't know of any black farmers in Illinois. Don't know any from Indiana, the Dakotas. It goes on. And I'm not talking about just someone that's, has a garden or even has a greenhouse. I'm standing in the gap for men and women that are buying $300,000 tractors, $800 a ton fertilizer, $5 a gallon diesel, and try to buy $4,000 to $5,000 an acre land to operate on. Those men and women have a different set of rocks in their pillow at night when they go to bed than the men and women in the produce industry or in controlled environments. The challenges that we have as far as crop insurance and access for irrigation and seed and chemistry, all that is a constant roller coaster that we ride, and there are not too many people that look like me on that same roller coaster.
PJ's ride on this roller coaster started when he was just a young, aspiring farmer, still standing in his father's shadow and somewhat in the dark, before that fateful meeting at Monsanto when he was already 10 years in. He almost didn't get there.
I'm seeing these parallel tracks, right? Like there's information coming from companies, you're trying to fill the gap, and there's the USDA, and I'm sure there's more than that has affected the trajectory of black farmers. Can you take me back in time a little bit to your early experiences with the USDA and paint me a little picture there?
A friend of mine who was in high school with me, I saw him in the summer, he said he wasn't going to go to school. He was going to stay back and work his family land, and he got a beginning farmer loan at USDA. I said, well, I want to farm too. Why don't I go in and inquire about a beginning farmer loan? I walked into the county office that day. My dad had a meeting, and I asked the county executive director if I could talk to him about a beginning farmer loan. Go back to his office. My dad was out front at the counter doing some paperwork. I said, I'm interested in talking to you about a beginning farmer loan. I want to farm and want to work with my dad and my family and do, what a lot of farmers do. Some of my friends are farming. That gentleman said, why do you want to farm? You're in college. You got a good head on your shoulder. Don't you want to go work in industry or agriculture? I said, no, that's not what I want to do. Well, I really think you should consider that. He sat in his chair and he reached behind his desk and he grabbed a file. He said, look at your dad. This file. How much money your dad owes the government. Why do you want to get into farming? Why do you want to get into agriculture? I said, well, sir, that's my dad's situation doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm coming to you as a young kid who's interested in farming, and I want to farm. Why would you discourage me from something, a dream that I have, It was a very uncomfortable situation. But I don't think you need to do that. I think you need to just go ahead and finish school and get you a job and go work for the USDA or something like that.
Maybe right now you're thinking, all that debt, a college education. Sure, maybe this guy was just trying to give PJ his best advice.
I said, well, I don't think you need to tell me how to live my life. And, as a young college kid, I had a little bit of education. I knew that I shouldn't be discouraged from my dreams, knowing that my same friend from high school sat down in front of that same fella and got a beginning farmer loan. So as the conversation heated, got even more difficult, the fella pulled out his center desk drawer, and he had a pistol sitting in that drawer. And he looked down at that pistol and looked up at me and said, I think this conversation is about over. And Dana, when I reflect back on some of the same tragedies that we witnessed in 2020, death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, I could have been a statistic that day right in that USDA office if I didn't keep my cool. That wouldn't have been a good ending. I wouldn't have been able to stand here today and tell you my story. And I vowed that day that I never want another young black kid to ever have to experience any intimidation or degradation on the character of that person. A citizen, a taxpayer, coming into the government office to talk about what I can do to help feed, clothe, and fuel the world, just like every other farmer and their kid had to do. That guy wanted to blow my thunder right then and there off the gate. Now, he could have won, and he could have discouraged me, and I could have said, hell with this. I don't want to deal with people like this for the rest of my life. But no, it did. That old boy lit a fire in my belly, and it's still raging today. And I'm thankful for the grace of God that I wasn't a victim standing in that office that day. I'm fortunate that I'm able to help others not have to deal and endure with that same thing. And I'm fortunate to have been appointed by President Biden to serve on the USDA Equity Commission to help address some of these standing wrongs that have happened. You know, when we talk about the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they have a presence in every county throughout every state. Just like that same officer, that same agent that I was dealing with right there, that fellow was hired by the local county committee. And the county committee has so much influence and makes so many decisions in rural America. They make decisions whether little boys that look like me were going to get a loan or not. They make decisions on folks like my dad, if they were going to get an emergency loan or not. And when most of those farmers sitting around that county committee don't look like me, most of the decisions that are happening are not in my favor, implemented in the 1930s. And it's still falling today. There's a lot of the farmers who are out here in rural America who farm beside black farmers and join and even work black farmers' land. They sit on these same county committees. They sit back in these offices. They're making decisions. They got a brother who's the banker down here, and they says, hey, you know what? Dana's not going to be able to make her loan payment come fall because I looked at them crops she's got in the field, and it doesn't look too good. So I own the farm that joins her. When she defaults, I'll be ready to go ahead and buy that land. Or they come in and they say, you know, Dana's a good farmer, but if we slow her up on her money, she's not going to be able to farm. So Dana goes in and applies for her loan in February. She doesn't get her operating loan approved till June. All Dana's neighbors' corn are chest high. And you just go to the field to start planting. What do you think is going to happen when your crop starts pollinating in the hot dog days of August? You're not going to make a crop, Dana. Your neighbors are going to cut 150, 200 bushels of corn, and you might cut 75. And you don't have enough resources at the end of the year to go and pay your loan off. So then all those good old boys sitting around that county committee, they come out and then they can issue that gentleman that they hired, that county executive director, to put a for sale sign or a foreclosure sign in your front yard. That happened like domino effects across the South. So I hate to be long-winded, but that's the story that I wanted to share with you, and you know the past and you can understand my focus for the future.
In case you are thinking, what? Did this really happen? So systemically? With back-channel oppression? I don't really have another word for it. It did. Racial discrimination is not new at the USDA. In April of 1999, the Pigford versus Glickman class action lawsuit was decided in favor of 400 Southern black farmers. Timothy Pigford, who filed the lawsuit, was a corn and soybean tenant farmer in North Carolina. The victory underscored racial discrimination by the USDA with regard to farm loans and assistance to black farmers. Over 13,000 farmers received settlements totaling nearly $1 billion in the largest civil rights settlement to date. That billion was just a drop in the bucket compared to what black farmers had lost. And There were complications with the suit. It's a topic for another day, as it's still ongoing.
I know in your mind you see a future that you want for Black farmers, and I'm curious what you think the steps are, like the top 3 things that need to happen.
One, we need to recognize the disparities that are in place. We need to recognize that there are a few Black row crop farmers out there. And if we'll use the analogy just like we do on our farms, protect the crop and it will be okay. Protect the herd and the herd will grow. If we protect the remaining few Black row crop farmers, then we create opportunities for them to grow. I have to make farming appeasing to my children so the next generation will come. 30, 40 years ago, a lot of kids saw their parents struggling. Dad could never buy mom a nice car, having to have a nice house. So those children of those farm families chose to go north to the cities where they could get good jobs and send money back down to mom and dad. And what it did, it removed a whole generation from the farm. So you have thousands of acres of Black-owned land in the South that are absentee landlords. The ownership is in north in the city where they had jobs in Detroit in the automobile industry, and Chicago and St. Louis, and moved up north from the Mississippi Delta, from the Arkansas Delta, Louisiana Delta, and still own land, but they did not choose to follow in their forefathers' footsteps to be farmers. So that's why the number of Black farmers around this country, Black farmers, it was a genocide, the process that took place, because we are almost extinct. Also have to be able to have conversations, the organizations and leadership, to not complain about the past, but to explain tangible outcomes for the future. I have to start planting seeds now in the Black agriculture community so we have a crop to harvest in the future. And one day I want to be like the old retired farmers that ride around the gravel roads and criticize all the young farmers for what they're doing right or wrong. But if I don't have anybody that looks like me coming up the field to give constructive criticism to, I haven't done my part. So I want to help grow the future of Black agriculture. And so if we create opportunities, how are you going to expect a young kid to have the same debt to asset ratio and the same equity when his family's been denied access and discriminated against? And now, you want to have that kid to be just as equitable on paper as his white neighbor who's had land gifted to him for the last 4 generations. It doesn't happen. First, we have to protect the herd. We have to slant the playing field. We have to incentivize the youth and incentivize people to come into production agriculture. And then we have to build models that are vertically integrated, from production to processing to contracts out there. Then that is a circle that we build that's continuing to evolve. A family can grow a crop, they can add value to it and process that. And then you have companies right now, Cargills of the world and so many others that are doing things to address the inequities in Black agriculture, to help contracts to buy the commodities that we grow. There's so many people sitting around the tables that are making decisions on agriculture today that have no clue. And we need to have more dirty boots around the tables that are making decisions about agriculture to give an honest reflection and make everybody aware of what happens on a farm today.
Are you talking about a government table, or what other tables are you talking about making decisions?
Government tables, policy, industry, people sitting in these corporate boards and corporate decision makers. There's not a lot of diversity in there. And more so on the policy side of it, when we look at a lot of people in industry, don't have a lot of production and practical experience that they go to make decisions on what farmers do. That's the challenge that we have today. We are the minority, but we are controlled by the majority. We've got to change that.
I have one more question for you, and I have one question with 2 sides. I'd love to hear what is the one thing that you want Black farmers to know from your position about farming in the future?
The one thing that I would like Black farmers to know is that there is a network out there that can help share information. The National Black Growers Council is the conduit to help Black farmers connect, exchange information. There's so many things that farmers are doing to make the world a better place that the average consumer that drives, lives, and eats every day doesn't even think about. So I'd like for other Black farmers to know that the National Black Growers Council is a tool in their toolbox to help access to information, monetary benefits to your farms for the implementation of certain programs, because some of this information you may not get in your mailbox. So let this organization do its job in helping make sure you know about this information. Knowing is half the battle.
I always want to know from farmers, what is one thing that you want non-farmers to know that they maybe aren't thinking about?
If you ate today, thank a farmer. You were clothed today, thank a farmer. Farmers touch you every day more than you can realize. And there is no culture without agriculture. I don't care where you go in the world, you have to sit up and take nourishment multiple times a day. And agriculture is the source.
I have heard this echoed from farmers big and small, from Alaska to Florida. At those two little words, thank you, goes such a long way. Farmers do the work that they do for you. And while it's their job, they take that personal connection so seriously. And thank you is the least that we can do, right? I want to ask you to do me a small favor, okay? If you liked this episode, which I'm pretty sure you did because you're still here, would you drop me a little note and let me know your thoughts? It could be as simple as a thumbs up or deeper if you've got something on your mind after listening to this. You can email me at farmgirl@xoxofarmgirl.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at xoxofarmgirl. I am so easy to find, and I really want to know your thoughts. Also, here's a little reminder to check the show notes for that Washington Post article and another piece that I think you'll enjoy after listening to this episode. Thanks for being here and sharing this time with me. Talk Farm to me is the second best place to get to know a farmer. I still believe that getting to know a farmer in person at your local farmer's market is the best way, but sometimes they don't have a lot of time to talk. So I get them to talk farm to me here. I hope you will talk farm with your friends and family about the amazing farmers like PJ who you meet here. They are such good examples of the farmers who live and work so hard in your own community. Until next week, I'm your host, Dana DiPrima, and this is Talk Farm to Me.